Hello and welcome to this speed CAD. My name is Lewis and this is my reindeer design for the MyMiniFactory slash Vectary competition. This is probably the second time that I've used Vectary and learnt a lot of stuff in the past competitions, and I just thought I'd try and share a few bits of information, stuff which I picked up on whilst trying to make this little reindeer bust, which is quite nice. So I started with a cylinder, extruded it, and then used the transform tools to stretch it. Not stretch it, but to condense it. And then what I've done is take a few of the surfaces and use the extrude tool to pull that forward, subsequently then splitting it and using it to create sort of the head and neck area. What you're looking at now is I am trying to split away half of the body so that I can use the mirror tool, which I'll pick up in a minute. Just so that you're only working on one half of the surface model, and obviously everything duplicates across. So I picked up sort of a few little pointers here, but I spent a lot of time messing about with this and trying to get the mirror right, and I actually cut a lot of this out of the video, but had a lot of trouble with not understanding that when you bake a mirror, it actually copies both the original surface and the mirrored surface and converts it into one file, which was fairly confusing for me. But basically it just requires not splitting out the side surfaces. So what I'm doing here is basically just adding a little bit more detail. I'm using the line tool, draw tool, to move points and split some surfaces up to create sort of the nose and mouth areas. Obviously just pushing, pulling faces, use the extrude tool I think to get that back in place, and just sorting out the edges, pulling the bevels in a little bit, and you're just trying to get a nice sort of smooth transition into the mouth. A lot of the time I'm using the transform tools. One of the big things which I found was I was trying to pull points quite a lot, and it's quite difficult, particularly if you're trying to do it freehand. Having the ability to turn the snaps on and off, found myself using just the quick keys. So S is the quick key for turning snaps on and off. But turning snaps off and on and off, and being able to move stuff freehand is a hell of a lot easier than trying to transform in three directions, which is quite a lot of what I'm doing here. So the first time there I'm using the smoothing tool, which I find really useful. It's good for obviously taking your polygonal model and converting it so that it renders into something which is actually a little bit more lifelike. Something that I probably didn't really think I would ever get to in this program. But I quite like the low poly stuff. I think it's really useful. But just having that, particularly when you're making something quite organic, like this deer head, it's quite useful. So again, pulling surfaces out using the extrude tool, bringing them back in, and just generally moving points around. It's quite simple. One of the few things I jump into occasionally, the close, or I forget what it's called. You can delete surfaces and then use one of the tools to instantly fill the surface, and that's quite useful, particularly later on when you come across little bits of surface which don't properly knit together, and they create sort of like these weird little like drag marks or like pulls in the surface. I'm not really used to surface modelling per se, because a lot of the time I use programs like SolidWorks and Fusion, and they work in solid bodies as opposed to surfaces. So this is quite a nice sort of change of pace for me, and do quite a lot of competition stuff just because it's sort of varied briefs, and I don't really get that kind of freedom in my day to day, because generally I'm working on CAD 8 hours a day, and last thing I want to do is come home and do more. But ultimately it's good fun, and it can only sort of better my design skills, which is quite useful. Keep saying quite useful, but so right now I'm pulling all the antlers out, doing a little bit of dragging surfaces. Nothing too complicated really. I think the most advanced tools that I actually use in this model, sort of the combine, I do a little bit of splitting surfaces and triangulating surfaces to split them down. But yeah, here you can see I've got this nasty little crease going on through the rest of the model, and subsequently quite a lot of time was spent trying to get that out. Here's what I'm talking about: moving little bits and trying to get rid of these nasty little creases, and eventually just deleting the surfaces and filling them in, starting again. Got a few rogue lines in there which pulled in some kind of weird physics. Here I'm trying to get a better split for duplicating the part. And now we're starting to see the final thing coming together. It's looking pretty smooth. There's a few little bits and pieces that need tweaking. Some of the aspects are a little bit off, so obviously I'm sorting that stuff out. This whole video is cut down to sort of 10 minutes or so, but the actual process probably took about 2 hours. Like I say, I'm not very experienced with Vectary. I've used it for probably 20 hours or something like that, but it's really easy to get the grips with. One thing I really don't like about it is manipulating the views with the left-hand mouse button, because I'm used to mainly using scroll wheel or space mouse. I find the snapping can be a bit annoying at times as well. So here I've just created a couple of eyes, and I'm mirroring that as well, using that and pulling that back in. And now we're coming sort of towards the end of the model, where I'm just finalising a few little extra details and trying to get that mirror properly aligned. I cut out quite a lot of surface deleting and stuff, but here we go, we're looking at just moving that surface back in and finishing up the little bust. So I think the final sort of step for this is just changing the colour, and that stuff's quite easy to do on the fly. So here I'm just trying to decide what I'm actually doing with the thing. Pulling that wireframe mesh off makes it look a hell of a lot better. So the model's available on both MyMiniFactory and on Vectary. Really easy to drag stuff across from one program to the other. They've got these cool little plugins which you can install or allow, and just drags, not even drags, but just goes and exports straight from one into the other. I got my accounts linked, although I'm not entirely sure how that happened. It just sort of did. But yeah, hopefully by the time this video comes out, you'll be able to see the printed product. And yeah, I really hope you liked my video. Thank you. Bye.